When you begin marketing really, really high-end properties, like the kind that are found in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, the playground of billionaires, you learn something about not just marketing a structure, you learn something about marketing a lifestyle. Today's episode, we highlight one of the top luxury agents out of Jackson Hole, Wyoming. He has some incredible lessons for all real estate agents and all professionals. And today we're going to be talking about that, specifically about how to really market your properties in such a way that people want to live in that property for the lifestyle that it gives. It's going to be a great episode. So the big question is this: how do those of us in the real estate industry who have crazy amounts of ambition, how do we think bigger than the building of our own empires? How do we create success and significance, income and impact? My name is Justin Stoddard. This is my co-host Stephanie Peck. And together, we bring you the Think Bigger Real Estate. Hello, Stephanie. How excited are you about today's topic?
I am super excited because this marketing technique is exactly what I strive for. So I'm going to learn a lot today.
Can't wait. So good to have you here. And today's guest, Latham Jenkins, again, out of Jackson Hole, Wyoming, has quite the storied background as far as even marketing, listing one of the most famous, and maybe you can speak to this, Latham, one of the most famous listings in the country. Give us some background on that. I think it'll give people some context as to the types of properties that you list.
Well, thank you. First of all, Justin, Stephanie, I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the show. You guys provide such valuable insights to all of us, and I want to thank you for that. And this opportunity today, living in a place like Jackson Hole, it's all about, what I really refer to as aspirational lifestyle. Buyers here are looking into something that they've longed to have in their life, the opportunity to live in a mountain town, to play in the mountains, to catch fish, to ski. And it's something that has just paralleled, the last 30 years that I've spent here, basically sharing almost in a diary basis through my Instagram account and other content marketing, what it's like to live here. And I'm very fortunate in that, in my mid 50s now, I tend to be around the age group of a lot of the buyers. And so, we're connecting on that front too. Obviously, the gray hair builds trust that they're not working with a junior associate. But nonetheless, I spend a lot of time with buyers or sellers, whether we're, sitting in a drift boat, fishing on the Snake River, or happening to ski, discussing business. And it's just, this kind of confluence of lifestyle and business here works so well because, in most cases, people have already spent 20 years, 25 years of their life getting to this point of acquiring a property in Jackson Hole and kind of moving on in their life to a more active lifestyle that they, in many cases, would find more fulfilling just being in the environment that Jackson Hole offers.
I love it. Well, apparently you're too modest to talk about one of your big accomplishments here, so I'll do it for you. Had the first and fourth most popular listing for the year on Mansion Global in 24. So your approach of being very approachable and talking about lifestyle obviously dovetails nicely with some of the wealthiest people and some of the most illustrious properties wanting to utilize you for the marketing of those, of those particular listings. So congratulations to you on that. That's exciting.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that was that was completely unexpected as I looked through the list with Mansion Global to not only be number one, but to have a second listing, the number 4 spot. Keeping in mind those listings are worldwide, right? And 2 of them came out of this area. And what I've always found, which I think is most important for the real estate professionals, joining us today, is that is all based on imagery. I was able to put people in that spot, whether they are a buyer or not. And they identified with the imagery, and I spent a lot of time shooting that imagery. I actually shoot it myself. And it's always been a dream to be a storyteller, in most cases for me, a visual storyteller, but that's rooted in history and property understanding, not just roaming around hoping to get a great shot. And, when you receive kind of, Mansion Global, that's reader based. So in other words, it's not just an editor who I've made a relationship with, nominating that. That's all through clicks. And to see such a large statistical sample, identifying with the work's very rewarding. And it makes me feel better about all the time that I spend in the field. But really, what I like to tell even people on the sell side, that time in the field is what informs how I show the property. There's no shortcut to time. Why don't we just call it time on property, to understanding the asset that you're marketing. And it makes a huge difference because when to bring them, for showings, which way to walk them around the property. And, this is one of the things that I've learned. And I think another great takeaway, all too often we bring our clients right into the improvement. But if the improvement's not the best asset, i.e. maybe you got 8 acres that's beautiful in an old ranch style house, if you walk them around that property, have them fall in love with the setting, they don't get so fixated on the house. And, many houses have shortcomings, right? The next owner is going to make it their own home. It might be something that's had some type of neglect or just needs so much attention. So, never forget the lot that it sits on, or, in my case, all the acres that I have to market. I often start tours with a walk, and obviously picking the right time of day to do that. We've got a busy airport in Jackson Hole. We have elk that come out in the morning. We have all these factors that you want to take into consideration of making sure you have a positive experience when you walk around the property.
I love it. I was just showing those that are watching the live broadcast or the video version. You'll see that I just showed some highlights of Latham's Instagram account, which is beautiful. $65 million ranch overlooking the Tetons. I went to a little college in Idaho, and I could see the Tetons from where I was at. And we actually drove up to Jackson Hole at one point, and just some of the most beautiful country in the world. And how fun to be selling real estate in that area.
It is.
So you've given us some great tips already about kind of marketing lifestyle, not just structures. I'm sure Stephanie has some questions. Again, she is a top real estate agent here out of the Portland market, and has luxury properties that she markets as well. So Stephanie, I'm curious, what's going through your mind? What questions do you have?
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessarily a question, because you covered exactly what we're thinking, and I just want to commend your process, and also, I guess, just say for anyone that's listening to this, think about what you love to do and then sell the lifestyle around that. Because Latham, that's exactly what you're doing. If you love fishing and you love walking properties and you love the lifestyle of where you're selling, I mean, what a dream job to say, hey, new client, I'm not going to take you straight out to this home. We're not going to look at the kitchen and worry about the size of the bedrooms. I'm going to take you fishing. I mean, how amazing is that? Every real estate agent's thinking, how do I have that job? And so what you've created really is highlighting a lifestyle. So I just wanted to point that out again and say that is very commendable. If you have anything else around the process of that, that would be good for people to hear. It sounds like you're very strategic with, like you mentioned, the time of day, when you pick them up from the airport, how you show up in their lives. So anything that you can add to that would be really valuable.
Sure. Well, the things that I think about that are takeaways, because yes, I live in a more unicorn environment. And so people are often here in the audience, well, I wish I had elk on my property. I do that too. But the things to think about is, you want to be seen as the brand ambassador to a neighborhood, to a region, something that the insides about, because that naturally comes off as you're driving clients around, whether it's a neighborhood, a subdivision, or parts of a city. And, that builds trust quietly from your knowledge base. And it's also, I live in an area where it's more than just the transaction, it's helping them start their life. And so being that trusted resource throughout that kind of term of the relationship, it's very front loaded, of course. And once they get their feet on the ground, they're not calling as much, but it's being a brand ambassador. And then also, exuding that through your, through your social channels and your outreach. And I've often thought, well, just be the person that knows everything about a certain subdivision. Let's just say it's got enough units in it that there's enough sales volume in there to be the known expert, but that's exuded through being a brand ambassador and talking about what it's like to live there, the types of people that you're going to be around. And, you can go as far as radiating out, talking about schools and connectivity to the broader community as well. But all too often in real estate, we try and be everything to everybody. We're looking for any opportunity for a listing, any opportunity to represent a buyer. And there is no successful brand in this world that functions that way. So it leaves us scrambling, and leaves us all, a lot of times in a bad position, especially in down markets like this, where your base is too broad. You've got to be more narrowly focused in order to be successful with the transaction volume needed to support yourself. And I believe everybody brings something to the table, but you've got to spend time and thinking about your own brand of where does your knowledge lie? Do you have the authenticity to deliver on that? I.e., do you really know the subject that you're trying to be an expert in? Can you talk about it off the top of your head without referencing notes? And all of that helps to build trust, whether you're being recognized by people selling homes in a certain market that you're focused in, and or buyers that you're driving around in a car and pointing things out. So specialization is such a key component to being successful in real estate.
Yeah, I love that, because exactly what you said is that too many try and think that they're going to lose by going deep, right? I'm going to miss all these opportunities out here. What I hear you saying is that you actually lose, and your clients lose as well, when you try and go a mile wide, an inch deep, right? Versus really drilling down on an area of expertise and passion for you, to where when you speak to something, it comes not just from here's the data, right, that I might have Googled before you got here, but this is what it feels like to live here, which maybe is a segue into the next topic. You're known as being an emotive storyteller. And I'm really passionate about this topic, because I think that as the world moves towards AI and artificial, we're losing the fact that we're human and that people make decisions based on emotion. And I think being a compelling storyteller is a compelling component. Sure, couple that with ChatGPT and all the efficiencies, but what I would encourage you to not do is don't lose out on what makes us completely unique, which is the fact that we're human. So can you teach us about how to be an emotive storyteller?
Sure. All of our purchasing decisions generally centered around an emotion, of either, getting something done and or how that's going to make my life feel better. And if you start with this understanding, and it's kind of brutal, almost all of our decision making is extremely selfish. If Stephanie sees herself in a beautiful looking red dress, you know what? The price falls away. It's going to bring her value. If Justin's thinking about the golf club that's going to give him an extra, 10 yards, he's going to spend money on it. So, our own consumption patterns or behaviors to watch as to why we do what we do and why do we want what we want. So as it relates to real estate and it relates to promoting our listings, look at back decks. Back decks are places on houses that we spend a lot of time. We have great cookouts on Sundays, for the family and friends that come over. But all too often, it's an iPhone being stuck out the back door and a picture being taken versus a nice grill set up with a cooler and cold beverages and snacks on the table. You want to shoot every key scene in a house, be it a living room, master bedroom, or a primary bedroom, kitchens, as places that you can just slip right into. You want to be in that moment. And I often translate a lot of our listing work to what we see in hospitality. When you see a very attractive, hotel property that you want to spend time in, they have set scenes that invite you right into that chair, poolside with a drink with an umbrella in it, sitting there. And it brings you right into the moment. So why do we not do that with the houses that we market? We often fail at doing that, and we don't create any type of distinctive imagery that sticks in a buyer's mind. I've had people walk through the front door and tell me right off the bat, I'm buying this house. I've watched that video 14 times, and it's incredible. I can't say who some of these buyers are, but it astounds me how quick they are to make a decision, given how successful they are before they've even really crossed the threshold, because the video pre-sold them. So really, when they're on a property, they're just checking off on really, what is a bias that they already have that they're buying it, but it makes them feel good to kind of walk it first. And all of that is rooted in research and spending time, in that property. If there's a beautiful breakfast nook, shoot it right as the sun's coming through the window and you get a sunlight trail, and food sitting there on the table and a newspaper. Like, that's a moment where you want to start your day with a hot cup of coffee, and in the afternoons, thinking about that on the back deck. The living room settings, set up for events, game nights, what have you. You just have to take it a step further to distinguish yourself from your colleagues, because most of our colleagues don't go to this level of effort, and they're relying on other factors to sell the home. But we live in a very visual time. Everything has become visual in our life, and you've got to focus on those photos. You've got to focus on the very key photo that's going to create the first click on Zillow or your MLS or however this buyer is seeing the listing. It's absolutely critical.
I want to mention something really quick, and then I want to give Stephanie the ability to talk about some of these principles and how she's also utilized them. What a word that you said really stood out to me, which is you're capturing moments. There was a great book written called The Power of Moments. In fact, I just pulled it up here. The Power of Moments: Why Certain Experiences Have Extraordinary Impact. There's certain little moments in time that have a massive impact upon us. And what I hear you saying is that in marketing lifestyle, you're really looking for places on the property, situations where people could picture themselves having one of those moments that has an extraordinary impact, right? Like that family dinner, that morning routine, right? That place to read, right? Like create those, like reenact those moments for people that cause them to say, I have to have that moment in my life, therefore I need that property, right?
Absolutely. And the other thing to think about, and Stephanie knows this far better than you and I, Justin, as the female, we're selling to females. We're selling to the nesters. We're selling to people that, the females that want to make this place an environment that their family is going to be safe, warm, well taken care of. And it's hard when you're a male, you don't always appreciate these emotions. I always use a female copywriter to balance out the biases that I know that are created in our genders. And I always think about the most important person in the room is the lady walking through the property, and how do we suggest, how this home is going to be just a perfect environment for her family. And, that's the other thing about the staging. It doesn't take a lot of work to go and get some flowers, some fresh fruit, and really liven up a space before you shoot it. I was helping an associate the other day, and I was looking at the real estate photography or the listing photography. They had jugs of water and a bunch of paperwork left on the countertop. And I'm like, the realtor didn't even take time to clear the countertop. And it just astounds me why someone thinks that is a great photo. And it's again, it doesn't take a lot of effort, just, some pre-thinking, some flowers, some fruit to really freshen up a room and declutter it and make it something that's very inviting to come into.
Love it. Stephanie, go ahead.
What I heard you say so many times is builds trust. Starting with gray hair builds trust. So but what I hear from you when you have said that over and over, builds trust, builds trust, builds trust, is really your process before you even meet the client, and how they are in your world before you even know it. And so walk us through how people are finding you, whether that's through your social media or through your listing presentation, online, how you're presenting your listings, and through partnerships that you have. Just give us a couple minutes about how people are coming into your world and they're already trusting you.
Well, I've been very fortunate from the media exposure that I've had. The Wall Street Journal has covered a number of my listings. Obviously, we talked about Mansion Global. So that's built a baseline of recognition because they see the body of work through those articles. And, in any community, there are always the connectors. And so once you start working on some of the listings that you really want to focus on, you're starting the ball rolling of other people recommending you for the work that you do. And it's a multifaceted approach to kind of building momentum with generating listing inventory through always being professional in your pursuits, creating case studies to help other others that are considering listing their property see the success that you had and how you created that. The the referral network within the professional community is absolutely key, because many families will consult with their trust attorneys before selling assets. And that trust attorney, he or she, can have a great influence. And often, when you get those leads from those professionals, you're not in a competitive listing presentation. You're already a trusted advisor at the table. So it's your job not to, in essence, lose that business, but to continue layering on, why that referral is made to you through the professional service that you're offering to the client. And again, it goes back to, think about when you go into a retail concept and you have a really great environment working with the sales associate. What have they done? They make you feel valued. And all too often we forget about that. When a client calls us and we give some other excuse as to why we can't be there or take the call, remember what's important to that client is, what they have on the table that they need to accomplish. And you have to make them feel like the most important person in the room, and remind them often of how much you value the opportunity of the work that you're doing. I refer to it as, look, simply, it's a privilege to work on these listings, nothing short of it. And I don't want to lose the opportunity going forward because I failed to service them correctly.
You spoke to a topic that's near and dear to my heart, that as author of the Upstream Model, you had mentioned prior to our episode today that you had closed, was it $200 million worth of listings from just a couple of professional partners? Is that right?
Well, I know that the listings I've generated over 200 million in listing inventory, really from two trust attorney situations. So it's, that's in the last 12 months. So it's, as you all, advocate for, and as I can attest to, these I call them channel partners. These channel partners are vital to success. And it creates kind of a constant stream of business that you're not directly spending money to win, but you're indirectly spending money shoring up your successes, behind the scene. Because, most people, when given a referral, they still want to do a little checking. And what are they going to do? They're going to go to your website. They're going to ask around in the peer community. So you want to make sure your successes are visible enough for others to find. And again, that's just kind of, that's just checking off that a seller, before they've hired you, they've done their due diligence. They've received a great referral, but they want to trust but verify. So do you give enough sources to help verification, to make sure that that's easy for someone to do it? And it's, again, these are simple processes. If you're doing good things, you do have to let others know. And look, we're raised in life not to go around tooting our own horns. No one likes to just sit at a table and hear someone talk about themselves all the time. But if someone's trying to verify your successes, you can't make it too challenging for that to be known.
Stephanie, anything you wanted to add to that?
I mean, another one, trust but verify. I love it.
Well, it's referred to as social proof, right? In other words, the testimonials that we're sharing, our sales volumes, we have to give enough information to a prospective, whether they're going to hire as a buyer's agent or hire you to list their house. You have to help them understand who you are. And again, there are not enough of us out there really advocating in ways that adds value. I always like to think, here's another marketing line. All right, so we talked earlier about so many of our decisions are completely selfish that we go through every day. If you think about what you put out there, starting with this statement, why should anyone give a damn? You know what I mean? And then you relate that to, okay, I'm going to share this information so that it's informative, it's value adding, and it hopefully creates a happy moment in someone's life. I just launched a reel the other day on that $65 million Red Hills Ranch. We have over 500,000 views in just a couple of days. And it's trending so well because it takes people into a moment. It's in a moment that they relate to. The international audience has been just kind of very interesting. But even more so, two things came out of that reel. I see how many of my fellow realtors have shared it on their Instagram accounts, obviously hoping to connect with a buyer. And I see how many people that are actually go forward a little bit on that, Justin. It's the next one, same topic, but it's more current. Let's see, Red Hills Ranch down in the center. Oop, click that one off.
Right there.
Okay, next to the dog. Yes, that one. So this one, where are we on our view count? Let's see, it's probably down at the bottom. But long story short, over 500,000. But it's doing so well because there's just a lot of feel good in there. Horses, mountains, Zach Bryan soundtrack. Like it's very current. And it's the thing that I've been really excited about, as I just said, was how many of my colleagues in the industry have chosen to share it. So in other words, it's radiated out in ways that I could have never bought media to have done. And I would sure hope that one of my colleagues in the real estate industry finds that buyer and brings them here. So
how cool. Well, I wish we could spend more time with you. And I maybe this is an open invite to come back and join us again. I do have
well, when I finish reading your book.
Yeah, there we go. I think we'll have more to talk about then. So I just want to thank you so much again for those that want to follow you and even help you find a buyer. I'm sure there's a few interested parties doing that.
I'd love to.
Yeah, we've put the in fact, I'll put it up here again, the Instagram for lathamjenkins.jacksonhole. For those of you that are just listening to the audio, and super grateful for the opportunity to spend some time with you and really learn about, again, how to market luxury lifestyle, not just luxury properties. And so we appreciate it, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. And thank you so much, Stephanie. Again, thank you for all your great insight and for also really being somebody who also exemplifies the lifestyle. I've seen you do this listing after listing. And so I know this was a topic that was near and dear to your heart because you're super good at it as well. So
yes, thank you.
Well,
that was wonderful. Thank you, Latham.
Well, Justin, Stephanie, I thank you both. And I thank you for making us all better professionals. So, keep raising the bar.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much, everybody. And my final request are these 3 simple words, and they are go think bigger. Latham, thanks for helping us do that today.
All right.
Before you go, we've got one more invitation for you. We all know that listening to a podcast is not enough to help you to become a big thinker and high achiever. We must take action. So the very first step, think about one lesson learned from this podcast that you'd like to apply, and send it to us in the form of a direct message at Think Bigger Real Estate. We look forward to